At exactly 3:17 in the morning, I shot awake to the blaring of an alarm, the screech of tires, and flashing red and blue lights flickering across my bedroom walls like something out of a movie. Still half asleep, heart racing, I stumbled over to the window, and what I saw could have been the opening scene of an action film. Cops in full gear were swarming the street, shouting commands into their radios like a well-rehearsed SWAT team. But that wasn't the part that knocked the wind out of me. It was my Jeep, gone. Just gone. The same Jeep I had locked up and parked exactly where the local task force told me to, right out front. And in its place? A bright orange traffic cone. Sitting there with a sticky note slapped on the side that said, "Code violation. HOA confiscated." I didn't know whether to scream, laugh, or just break down on the spot. Apparently, Kathy from the HOA had gone full vigilante. She cut the lock off a government surveillance vehicle, yeah, really, and had it towed like it was an old couch left out for bulk pickup. She had no clue she just wrecked a months-long federal sting operation. And now, I had a couple of very serious-looking agents standing outside, asking me where their surveillance Jeep had gone. That's when it hit me hard. I had to tell the federal government that my Jeep was stolen by a neighborhood HOA president. Moving into Willow Creek Estates was supposed to be my clean break. After years overseas and bouncing around cities, I wanted to settle down. Have some peace and quiet. A backyard for my dog, and a garage big enough to work on bikes. At first, it was great. Neighbors smiled, kids rode their scooters in the cul-de-sac, and the whole place smelled like grilled burgers and fresh mulch. But as I soon found out, peace has an arch-nemesis. Her name was Linda Farthington, or as folks around here called her, Karen Supreme. She wasn't just the HOA president, she was the HOA. If your grass got too long by half an inch, you got a fine. Halloween lights up after October 31st? Written warning. And if you happen to own a rugged, black Jeep with blackout plates and reinforced bumpers, you, my friend, were apparently violating some unwritten Geneva Convention. The first time Linda saw my Jeep, she puckered her lips so tight they practically disappeared. "That thing doesn't belong in this neighborhood," she muttered, glaring at it like it had just insulted her entire family. "Looks like it rolled out of a demolition derby." I tried to play it cool, told her the Jeep was tied to some consulting work I was doing with law enforcement. She just snorted and said, "Nice story, soldier boy. Ever think of driving a Honda like a normal person?" From that moment on, she made it her mission to make my life difficult. Every week, I'd get another one of her little love notes, complaints about unauthorized modifications, aggressive tactical styling, and my personal favorite, parking intimidation. Turns out, a parked Jeep can apparently cause psychological distress. What she didn't know, because she was too busy weaponizing the bylaws, was that my Jeep had just been rigged with high-grade surveillance gear. A federal task force had approached me, asked if they could use it as a fixed observation post for a sting they were running on a drug ring that had infiltrated our quiet little suburb. So now, the Jeep had remote cameras, GPS trackers, and a full digital recording system. It was basically a mobile spy van in stealth mode. And the best part? Its intense look made it the perfect camouflage. No one suspected it was anything more than just a tough ride parked out front. Except Linda. But her hatred of it? That was exactly why they picked it. Of course, I didn't tell anyone, not even my nosy neighbor Glenn. The fewer people who knew, the better. I just followed instructions. Keep it parked out front, rotate the angle every few days. I'd shift the Jeep's position just slightly, just enough to follow the task force's orders. But under no circumstances was I supposed to move it without giving them a heads up. To make it extra clear that the thing wasn't abandoned, I even slapped a heavy-duty lock on the front wheel. It was both for security and for show, to prove this wasn't some rusted-out clunker gathering dust. Didn't matter to Kathy, though. That lock? It seemed to send her into some kind of HOA-fueled meltdown. She filed 5 separate complaints, each one more dramatic than the last, claiming it was an abandoned vehicle. I kept telling her it wasn't. Over and over. I reminded her it was parked legally, on my own property. But she just kept insisting she had the authority to remove community hazards. And one afternoon, while I was out running errands, she made her move. Kathy didn't call the city. Oh no, She hired a private towing company. One of those fly-by-night outfits that definitely don't ask too many questions. But before the tow truck even got there, she strutted right up to the Jeep with bolt cutters in hand and snapped the lock off like she was breaking into Fort Knox. Thing is, my neighbor Jeff, 2 doors down, basically lives on his front porch, and his Ring camera's always recording. He caught the whole thing. In the footage, she actually smiles at the camera after slicing through the lock and says, "Clear as day, one less eyesore to worry about." By the time I got home, the Jeep was gone. At first, I thought it really had been stolen. But then I saw the orange cone and that ridiculous sticky note. I marched straight to Kathy's door and knocked, but she didn't answer. Instead, she sent me this over-the-top formal email. Said the HOA had relocated the non-compliant vehicle to prevent visual pollution and maintain neighborhood standards. I laughed out loud at how insane that sounded, until I remembered what was inside the Jeep. I grabbed my phone and called the task force right away. They didn't laugh. In fact, they were at my door within half an hour. The lead officer, Detective Melendez, asked me to walk him through everything. When I showed him the Ring footage, his face went pale. "She cut the lock?" he asked, already looking stressed. "And had it towed without clearance?" I nodded, already sweating bullets. We weren't talking about some neighborhood spat anymore. This was tampering with federal surveillance equipment. At the very least, that's obstruction. That's when the whole tone changed, from frustrated to full-on DEFCON. The officers put in an emergency order to recover the Jeep, but we ran into a new problem. We had no idea where she took it. None of the local tow yards had it on record, which meant she'd stashed it somewhere off the books, probably illegally. Meanwhile, the entire sting operation my Jeep had been monitoring? The suspects had gotten spooked. A months-long investigation, completely blown up by a bored HOA president with a personal vendetta against off-road vehicles. So there I was, standing on my porch in the middle of the night, watching a full-blown federal task force scramble, without its surveillance gear, without its plan, and with its suspects vanishing into thin air. And Kathy? She was nowhere to be found. One thing was painfully clear: she had no idea what she'd just done. But once the law finally caught up to her, she was gonna wish all she'd done was leave another nasty note about my lawn. The next morning started with a single text from Detective Melendez. "We found the Jeep. You're gonna want to see this." My stomach dropped. I barely had time to throw on a hoodie before he pulled up in a blacked-out SUV. He didn't say a word the entire ride. I could tell from the tension in his jaw that whatever we were about to walk into, it wasn't just bad. It was going to be ridiculous. We drove about 10 minutes down winding, quiet back roads until we stopped at this old, rusted metal gate, tucked behind an HOA maintenance shed I'd never noticed before. Melendez stepped out, walked up to the keypad, and pointed at the gate. A padlock dangled there, just hanging, totally unsecured, like someone had forgotten to even bother locking it. And behind that gate? Behind that gate was a fenced-off patch of land, totally overgrown with weeds, and half covered in traffic cones, old tarps, and 3 dusty cars with parking stickers ripped off. Faded tickets flapped against their windshields like forgotten mail. And right there in the middle was my Jeep. It was scratched up, filthy, and parked all crooked, like someone had just dumped it there and walked away. The driver's side mirror was cracked, and the small black case that held the encrypted surveillance drive? Wide open. Completely gutted. I stood there, frozen. Just staring. Detective Melendez muttered something under his breath, kicked a cone aside, and started snapping photos. "This isn't a tow lot," he said, shaking his head. "It's a damn HOA graveyard. She's running her own impound lot out of a freaking utility shed." I walked around the Jeep, trying to make sense of the damage. The wheel wells were scuffed, mud was jammed deep into the suspension, and someone had obviously tried to pry open the glove box, probably with a screwdriver. It felt like seeing a headstone vandalized. Just gut-wrenching. Melendez got on the radio, calling for backup and a federal evidence team to secure the site. And then, like she was summoned by the pure rage in the air, Heather strolled in. Yep, that Heather. Heels clicking through the gravel like she was headed to brunch, not the scene of a federal crime. "Oh good, you found it," she chirped, smiling like she just helped locate a lost cat. "I was just about to notify you. I figured you knew the HOA had full rights to." Melendez didn't let her finish. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the vehicle." She blinked, confused by the sudden change in tone. "Excuse me? I'm the HOA president. I have full authority to remove unauthorized or unregistered vehicles." "You removed federal surveillance property from an active investigation," Melendez cut in sharp. "Do you understand how serious that is?" Her smug smile wavered, then twisted into this blend of disbelief and fake confidence. "You can't be serious," she scoffed. "That thing was an eyesore. I thought it was abandoned. I mean, it had a huge lock on it and hadn't moved in days. Honestly, I did you all a favor." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She actually thought she deserved a thank you. Melendez waved over another officer, who gently took Heather by the arm and started leading her away. She didn't go quietly. Nope. She just kept ranting, loudly, about how she'd saved the neighborhood and done what nobody else had the guts to do. Every word? Just digging her in deeper. As they walked her off for questioning, Melendez turned to me. "You got any footage from when she towed the Jeep?" I nodded, pulled out my phone, and opened up the video my neighbor Brad had given me from his Ring cam. There she was, plain as day, walking right up in broad daylight with a pair of bolt cutters. Snapped through that wheel lock like it was nothing. Then the tow truck pulled up, no logo, no license, just a shady-looking rig probably paid in cash. And the kicker? She laughed as they hauled the Jeep away. That laugh? Oh, it was going to come back to haunt her. By the end of the day, the task force had everything they needed: clear video, a full timeline, and now the cherry on top, a bootleg tow yard run out of an HOA shed. And just when I thought things couldn't get more bizarre, Brad came wandering over. He was carrying a lawn chair in one hand and a cooler in the other, looking way too happy for someone watching a federal crime scene unfold in a backyard. "So, he said, cracking open a soda, "you gonna tell her she just messed with the feds, or should I go ahead and post it to Facebook?" Turns out, Brad had been documenting everything. All of Heather's passive-aggressive letters, her wild speeches at HOA meetings, even the way she bragged in the community Facebook group about cleaning up the streets, one rusty eyesore at a time. Dave had it all. I'm talking full-blown archives, screenshots, Ring cam clips, the works. Every bizarre moment Donna had pulled since she declared herself queen of the cul-de-sac. And he handed it over like he was donating some priceless exhibit to a local museum. "I always knew she'd blow up," he said, grinning like a kid who called the ending to a movie. "Just didn't think it'd happen because she stole a government Jeep." But maybe the wildest part? The HOA hadn't been looped in at all. Donna had gone completely rogue. No board vote, no paperwork, no notice of removal. Nothing. It was 100% her own personal power trip, fueled by spite and an obsession with control. Once the news started trickling through the neighborhood, reactions were all over the place. Some folks were stunned. Others? Trying very hard not to throw a party. One woman actually came outside with a tray of cupcakes, frosted red and blue, each one topped with a tiny fondant tow truck. That evening, I got a call from Detective Sasha Lynn, the lead on the task force. Her voice was calm, but there was this razor-sharp edge under it. "We're reviewing the charges," she said. "Tampering with federal property, interfering with a surveillance operation, possibly obstruction. And no, her HOA position doesn't shield her from any of that." I asked what came next. "Well," she said, "once we finish assessing the damage and reviewing all the footage, we'll be turning this over to the district attorney. In the meantime, brace yourself. People like her? They don't go down quietly." And she was right. The next morning, a typed notice was taped to every front door in the neighborhood. Donna had called an emergency HOA meeting. Not to apologize. Not to offer an explanation. Nope. She wanted to justify her actions. According to the flyer, she planned to clarify what had happened in light of recent misunderstandings about community safety and so-called federal overreach. The audacity! She was gearing up to paint herself as the victim before she'd even seen the full mountain of evidence stacked against her. That's when I knew things were about to get even messier. But what Donna didn't realize was this: the walls were already closing in. And at that meeting, she wouldn't be running the show. This time, she wasn't holding the gavel, she'd be sitting under the spotlight. And it wouldn't just be irritated neighbors and dessert trays waiting for her. There'd be attorneys, federal agents, and a whole stack of subpoenas. A lot of subpoenas. The emergency HOA meeting was set for Friday night. By the time it rolled around, the community center was absolutely packed. Not just with residents, but with news crews, legal observers, and several folks in dark suits who looked like they hadn't cracked a smile in about 20 years. The room buzzed with tension. Everyone wanted to know what Donna Farthing, the former untouchable queen of suburban micromanagement, was going to say. She showed up 15 minutes late, of course. Wearing a fire engine red blazer like she was about to host Family Feud, not face down a federal mess of her own making. Clipboard in hand, smile locked in place, she marched to the front of the room. She gave a little nod to the stiff-faced board members seated behind the long table, tapped the microphone twice, and took a breath, like she was gearing up for a TED Talk. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she said, her voice all sugary and polished. "I'd like to address the recent situation involving the removal of an illegally parked, unregistered vehicle from our neighborhood." Someone near the back snorted. I didn't even have to look, I knew it was Dave. Donna pushed on, unfazed. "As your HOA president, I take the safety and visual integrity of our community very seriously. When I saw a clearly abandoned Jeep, chained up and sitting untouched for days, I followed what I believed to be the proper procedure to have it removed. I had no knowledge of any undercover operation, nor was I informed that the vehicle belonged to any government agency. Frankly, I believe I was misled." That was it. I stood up. "Misled?" I said loud enough to cut through the room. "You cut the lock off a federal vehicle, had it towed without permission, and bragged about it on Facebook." A wave of murmurs rolled through the room. Linda shot me a death glare, but I wasn't backing down. I walked straight up to the front of the room, pulled a small USB from my pocket, and handed it to the community center's IT guy, who, judging by the way he was already standing by the projector, had definitely been waiting for this moment all week. The screen blinked to life. First up, Ring camera footage. There was Linda, clear as day, slicing through the wheel lock with bolt cutters. Then she waved to the sketchy tow truck like she was sending off a party guest, and laughed as it drove away. Next came the Facebook posts. One by one, screenshots of her community updates filled the screen. There she was, boasting about taking action, making snide comments about military cosplay, and then, the big one. Sometimes you have to break the rules to keep the streets clean. The room went dead quiet. One of the board members, a guy named Greg, who always looked like he lived in a constant state of fear around Linda, cleared his throat and whispered something to the person next to him. Linda looked like she'd just bitten into a lemon. Her voice cracked a little as she tried to regain control. "Okay, so maybe I was misinformed about who owned the vehicle. But it was clearly in violation of HOA standards, and the bylaws give me the authority to." "No, they don't," said a voice from the side of the room. Everyone turned. It was Detective Sasha Lynn. She stepped forward, cool and collected, holding a thick folder in her hands. "We've reviewed the HOA charter, your removal procedures, and every bit of documentation, or lack thereof," she said. "You didn't just skip the board. You failed to notify law enforcement, used an unlicensed tow company, and relocated a vehicle to an unauthorized storage site." Linda's mouth opened, but Sasha held up a hand. "We also confirmed the vehicle was part of a joint federal task force. Your actions compromised months of surveillance, damaged sensitive equipment, and led to the premature shutdown of an ongoing case." The room exploded in gasps and shocked murmurs. Linda spun toward the board like they were her last hope. But every single one of them was leaning back in their chairs, trying to distance themselves like they were dodging a sneeze. Then Greg, usually the most nervous guy in the room, suddenly stood up. "I'd like to make a motion to suspend Linda Fairfield from her role as HOA president, pending an internal investigation and legal review." Before she could respond, another board member raised a hand. "Seconded." And then a third voice, All in favor? A unanimous "I" echoed through the room. Linda's jaw dropped. She looked like someone had unplugged her from reality. You could tell she never imagined, even in her wildest control-freak dreams, that it could end like this. "You can't do this," she shouted, her voice going sharp. "This is a power grab. I built this HOA. I've served this community for 6 years. And you wrecked it in one afternoon," I said, stepping back beside Sasha. Linda scrambled to collect herself, flipping through the pages on her clipboard like they were going to save her. And then, in a move so ridiculous even the legal observers were caught off guard, she pulled out a sheet of paper and waved it over her head. "This," she declared, "is a cease and desist. Filed by my attorney against the local police department and Mr. Jacobs, for entrapment, defamation, and emotional distress. You'll all be hearing from my legal team very soon." Sasha didn't flinch. She walked forward, took the paper, gave it a quick glance, and handed it right back. "That lawyer? Trent Maxwell? Yeah, we know him. He's already under investigation for misconduct in 3 other HOA-related lawsuits. Good luck with that." At that moment, Linda finally realized she was standing alone. Even the people who'd always backed her, the ones who rallied behind her war on lawn gnomes and non-regulation beige mailboxes, stayed completely silent. Brad leaned over and whispered, "Ding dong, the witch is cooked." She spun on her heel and stormed out of the room, barking over her shoulder, "You haven't heard the last of this." But once she was gone, the mood shifted fast. It was like the room exhaled. Someone clapped. Then another. Within seconds, the entire place was on its feet, cheering. A standing ovation for the downfall of a tyrant wrapped in HOA power. Sasha leaned over to me and said, "We're forwarding everything to the district attorney. There'll be charges. Maybe not all federal, but she's not walking away clean." I nodded, still a little dazed. 4 months, Linda had acted like everyone was just a pawn in her little suburban kingdom. But it only took one arrogant move, cutting a lock, towing a Jeep, and her whole empire crumbled. As people started clearing out, I noticed Greg, one of the board members, lingering near the back. He walked over slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Hey, listen," he said. "I'm sorry about all this. We should have stood up to her sooner. She once threatened to fine me for flying an American flag on my porch." I told him it was okay. Honestly, fear had always been Linda's biggest weapon. And once that fear was gone, she didn't have anything left. That night, I slept like a rock. No sirens. No flashing lights bouncing off the bedroom walls. No passive-aggressive emails about my garage door color. But I knew the battle wasn't completely over. Linda still had lawyers, and she wasn't the type to fade quietly into the background. But at least now, she was off the throne. And for the first time in years, the neighborhood could finally breathe again. Within 48 hours of her downfall, the whole story went viral, way faster than I expected. It started when Brad uploaded the ring cam footage to Reddit. He posted it to r/entitled people with the caption, "HOA Linda cuts lock to impound my neighbor's Jeep. Didn't know it belonged to a federal task force." It hit the front page in 2 hours. By lunchtime, the video had over 2 million views. By dinner, Linda's face was all over TikTok, YouTube, and even on some guy's angry Twitter thread calling her suburbia's most dangerous tyrant. News vans started showing up like we were ground zero in the HOA wars. People actually drove in from neighboring towns just to take selfies in front of the Jeep, which the cops had returned to me, scratches and all. Funny thing? That same Jeep, once considered a visual nuisance, had become a full-blown local celebrity. Someone even launched a parody GoFundMe called Save the Tactical Jeep. It started as a joke, but people actually donated enough to pay for a full repaint. I went with matte black. Felt fitting. That Jeep had become a rolling monument to Linda's downfall. Still, beneath the memes and the cupcake parties, the situation wasn't a joke. The surveillance equipment inside had been trashed. That setback cost the task force months of progress, and they were still trying to recover. And Linda? Suspended or not, she wasn't done stirring up trouble. A few days after the meeting, she came back with all the grace of a wrecking ball. She showed up outside the county courthouse, standing behind a makeshift podium in a wrinkled suit, hosting a press conference nobody asked for. At her side, her new attorney, Trent Maxwell. That Trent Maxwell. The same guy Sasha had warned me about. He looked like a lawyer out of a cartoon. Slicked back hair, giant sunglasses, and that oily little smirk you only ever see on ambulance chasers in late-night commercials. This was the kind of guy who once got a parking ticket thrown out by threatening to sue the DMV. And now, here he was, standing next to Linda, claiming she was the real victim. He argued that the police failed to properly mark the Jeep as federal property, said I'd somehow set her up, and insisted that the HOA bylaws gave her immunity from any city or federal consequences. It was such a wild reach that even the local news anchor couldn't get through the segment without laughing. The legal response? Swift and brutal. The district attorney's office filed formal charges: unauthorized towing, destruction of property, obstruction of an active investigation, and tampering with surveillance equipment. The feds didn't slap her with charges just yet, but they did send a blistering letter to the HOA board. It basically said their surveillance operation had been compromised and demanded full cooperation going forward. The HOA board, still reeling from the public meltdown, issued an official apology and started pushing through long overdue reforms. Greg stepped in as interim president, and the very first thing he did was dissolve Linda's precious violation committee. People literally clapped in the street. It felt like a block party. But Linda? Oh, she doubled down. Her lawyer filed a countersuit. Against the HO, the city, the police department, and bizarrely, his argument? That by legally parking a government vehicle on my own property and securing it with a visible lock, I'd somehow baited her into committing a crime. Yeah, that was the case. The judge took one look, rolled his eyes, and tossed it so hard out of court that even the courthouse clerk couldn't hide a grin. Still, the damage to Linda's reputation was done. That's when the internet got involved, and it exploded. Memes started flying everywhere. One had her photoshopped into a Grand Theft Auto loading screen, bolt cutters in hand, with the caption, "Mission failed, federal charges incoming." Another turned her courthouse rant into a rap remix. Her auto-tuned voice echoed, "I didn't know it was federal." TikTok creators began recreating the ring cam footage, with dramatic lighting and sad emo filters. She went viral, just not in the way she'd ever wanted. Soon, even kids who didn't live in HOA neighborhoods were calling their strict parents Linda Farthingtons. But underneath all the chaos, something weirdly beautiful started happening around here. People were talking again, laughing, sharing drinks on porches instead of complaints through email. The grip of fear and petty rules had finally broken. Lawn chairs popped up overnight. Flags flew again. Kids drew chalk art on the sidewalks without worrying about fines. For the first time since I moved in, this actually felt like a neighborhood. Brad, being Brad, saw the opportunity and ran with it. He launched a website, thewatchdog.net, with help from a few neighbors. It took off fast. They compiled resources for folks dealing with overreaching HOAs, and the site really blew up after Brad posted a full breakdown of the Jeep saga. It had video clips, legal docs, and even a merch store. Yeah, really. They sold Team Jeep mugs and a t-shirt printed with Linda's original sticky note on the back. Code violation, HOA confiscated. As for the Jeep, eventually, the task force replaced all the damaged surveillance gear. And then, totally unexpected, they told me I could keep the upgraded version. Officer Melendez handed me the keys and said it was a token of appreciation. Did it make up for the busted operation? Not exactly. But I couldn't stop smiling when I saw it. The new Jeep had reinforced armor panels, updated blackout tech, and next-gen internal systems. I laughed out loud. Linda hated the old one. Wait till she sees this beast. The last twist didn't hit until about a week later. The HOA's insurance company had launched an internal audit, and, well, turns out Linda had been dipping into HOA funds for years. Quietly, repeatedly, without board approval. She'd been submitting fake expense reports, towing fees, private contractors, even her own printer ink, all tucked under vague line items labeled administrative recovery. Thousands of dollars. Gone. When the audit wrapped, the findings were forwarded straight to the authorities. And just like that, a whole new investigation was opened, this time for embezzlement. I was out on the porch when Greg walked over, holding a folder. He looked worn out but also kind of relieved. "She's done," he said, handing it to me. "The state's coming next week. They might dissolve the HOA altogether unless we rebuild it from scratch." I asked him, "What do you think happens if the HOA just disappears?" He shrugged and gave a small smile. "Maybe we just go back to being neighbors." As simple as that sounded, it hit me hard. Because that was the heart of it, wasn't it? One woman's obsession with control had snowballed into a whole system designed to keep people on edge. And in the end, it took one bold, ridiculous move, cutting the lock off the wrong Jeep, to unravel everything. That night, I rolled the new Jeep into the driveway. Brad had helped me paint a tiny custom tag under the back bumper. It read, "Number 1. I parked it right where the old one had sat. Front and center. Perfect tactical view." A couple of kids rode past on bikes, gave me a thumbs up. I saluted them back. Linda? She hadn't been seen since her last courtroom circus. Her lawyer had gone dark. Her house sat quiet. Rumor had it she was trying to sell, but nobody wanted to buy that house. The one where a woman went to war with a Jeep and lost to the internet. Justice didn't just come through subpoenas. It came through memes, through neighbors standing together, and through one incredibly stubborn vehicle. The final curtain dropped on a warm Saturday morning. It was one of those weirdly still days, where the air feels too calm, like it's holding its breath. I was sipping coffee, scrolling through the latest Linda memes, when I saw them. A convoy. 3 black SUVs, 1 sedan, and 2 uniformed U.S. Marshals stepped out like they were arriving on the set of a movie. They moved with quiet precision. Knocked once on Linda's front door. Waited 30 seconds. Then announced themselves. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. A locksmith was already standing by. A few minutes later, the door creaked open. People peeked through blinds. Some just came out and watched, popcorn in hand. It was happening. The arrest warrant had been signed. Linda Farthington was officially being taken into custody. No screaming. No dramatic outburst. When she finally stepped into view, her red blazer was wrinkled and her hair was a mess, like she'd been sleeping in that outfit for days. She was clutching a manila folder, probably filled with whatever last shred of proof she thought might clear her name. But all that was left was a slow, heavy walk to the back of a government car. They cuffed her in front, gently but firmly. And the look on her face? It wasn't anger anymore. It was disbelief. Like even now, she still thought this was just a big misunderstanding. That somehow this would all blow over. That it wasn't her fault. But it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was 100 little choices. One after another. Each one a little more entitled than the last, until she finally stepped across a line she couldn't come back from. When the marshals drove away, the block erupted in cheers. Nobody planned it. It just happened. But unfiltered. Strangely healing. Brad even set off a couple of fireworks he had left over from the 4th of July. It was the 4th of July when Sasha Lynn showed up again, this time to debrief a few of the neighbors. She stopped by my porch with a kind smile and handed me the final charge sheet. Obstruction, tampering with government property, running an unlicensed towing service, misusing community funds, and suspected embezzlement, she said. It sounded less like a legal summary and more like the plot of a Netflix crime doc. But the legal side was only part of the story. The HOA itself? It had completely crumbled. Half the board had already resigned. The other half voted to dissolve the entire organization rather than face what was shaping up to be a massive class action lawsuit from the residents. With no formal structure left, the bylaws Linda used to quote like gospel were now just shredded paper sitting in a forgotten binder. Greg stuck around to help manage the transition, but even he admitted most people were just happy the whole circus was over. The fines stopped. The passive-aggressive notices disappeared. People started planting whatever flowers they liked, painting mailboxes wild colors, and nobody said a word. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt like it belonged to the people who actually lived there, not to some self-appointed queen running a fake kingdom from a folding table. As a kind of thank you, The neighbors all pitched in and surprised me with a custom metal sign. It read, "Reserved for tactical eyesore." We bolted it to the curb in front of my house. It quickly became a local landmark. Even the mailman asked to take a picture with it. But the biggest surprise came the following weekend. Officer Melendez and Sasha came back, not in uniform, but in t-shirts and jeans, both grinning like kids about to reveal a birthday present. Sasha was holding a giant set of keys. They led me around back, and that's when I saw it. The maintenance garage, the same one Linda had secretly used as her own private impound lot, had been auctioned off after the investigation wrapped up. And guess who quietly bought it? The task force. On behalf of the neighborhood. Only, they didn't want to keep it. Melendez looked at me and said, "It's yours now." I blinked. "Wait, what?" He smiled. "If anyone's earned the right to decide what gets parked here, it's the guy who had his Jeep stolen by the HOA president during a federal sting operation." At first, I thought he was joking. But then he handed me the deed, signed, sealed, and mine. I had to sit down to take it in. The irony was perfect. The place Linda had used to dump my Jeep without permission now legally belonged to me. I decided to make it something useful. We turned it into a little community hub, a couple of workbenches, a small repair bay, and a whole wall of donated tools. We called it the garage. Open to anyone. No permits, no forms, no HA nonsense. Teens fixing up beaters. Dads patching bikes. Vets working on weekend projects. And to christen the place? The task force had one more surprise. A week later, the whole block lit up. A line of Jeeps, military, civilian, vintage, custom, rolled slowly through the streets. Vets from all over the county showed up. Cops too. The whole neighborhood came out. Brad live-streamed the parade, and it went viral almost instantly. Leading the line was my Jeep, shining, armored, and proud. Stenciled across the hood in bold white letters, "Community Watchdog." We ended the ride back at the garage. Sasha stepped forward, gave a short, heartfelt speech, and handed me a small plaque. It read, "In appreciation for keeping your cool when your HOA went full villain." It made the crowd laugh, but the weight behind it? That was real. Because this whole mess could have turned ugly. It should have turned ugly. But somehow, it became something better. A weird, hopeful reminder that when folks stand up together, even the most ridiculous abuses of power can be undone. Eventually, Linda took a plea deal. No jail time, but she was ordered to pay restitution to the HOA, fined by the state, and banned from serving on any association board for the next 20 years. She sold her house quietly and left town under cover of night. No goodbyes. No one cared. In the months that followed, the neighborhood came alive. We planted trees. We threw barbecues. People started calling the area eyesore estates, as a joke, but with pride. The sign stayed. The Jeep stayed. And Linda? She became a cautionary tale. A reminder that power without empathy always ends in disaster. Looking back, it's still kinda wild how all of this started, with a Jeep parked in the wrong place at the wrong time. But maybe that's the lesson. You don't always need a major crime to reveal a broken system. Sometimes, it just takes one person who thinks the rules don't apply to them, and one community that refuses to let that slide. Linda thought she was protecting the neighborhood. Truth is, she was the one threatening it the whole time. Now, every time I fire up the Jeep and hear that deep, gravelly purr, I can't help but smile. Because it's not just a vehicle anymore. It's a symbol. A story. And man, what a damn good story it turned out to be.